welcome, guys. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for taking your time out to also, despite all this big and exhausting sort of conference, I know it's cognitively a huge overload for you to gather information and try to make sense out of it. And I hope to provide you three things, actually, in this talk. First is talk a little bit about DeepKapha. There's been a lot of questions people have been asking, coming and asking. So what is it exactly that you do? How are you structured? Even what is your client base? And what is your mission? How does it work? So that I will cover in the first section. In the second section, I will give you the idea about DeepRRP. That is actually the whole core of this workshop session. And give an idea of why we believe that research is the way to go, and why research is so critical and crucial in understanding and solving problems, really, and at scale. And finally, we will go into talking about our own research, because we obviously don't want to talk about research that is happening in the world, but we want to talk about what we are trying to do to change the world. And that is the section which I will talk about a little bit. And then I will ask my colleague, Dr. Rahi Walambe, maybe you could just come over and just wanted to I wanted to sort of present my team. So Dr. Walambe has onboarded DeepKapha as of day before yesterday. We had a conversation. Obviously, we've been talking for months, and she played a pivotal role in writing an activation function. So very, very quickly, maybe 1 minute, and then you have, I don't know, I think you'll spend 20, 30 minutes talking about our beautiful activation function. It's just very brief on yourself, just maybe 2-3 lines.
Yeah. So hi, everybody. I'm Rahi. I work as teaching and research faculty in one of the institutes in Pune, Symbiosis Institute of Technology.
Thanks.
And recently I have, as Tarry mentioned, that I have just started working with DeepKapha and people in DeepKapha. So my background is in robotics. I've done my PhD in robotics in long time back, 2008, from Lancaster University. And since then I've been working in robotics and allied domains, controls, nonlinear control, AI and stuff like that. And for last 1.5 years, I have been working in deep learning, more or less on the problems related to medical imaging, the problems related to brain MRI, classification, prediction for brain tumors. And in the process, we came up with this new idea of an activation function, which I'll talk more when my time comes. And we have shown that it does better than ReLU and Swish and all the other activation functions. It gives us about 3% more accuracy than the existing activations on most of the benchmark data sets and some of our specific data sets that we have tried. So I'll come back to you and talk about the activation function in some time. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, Rahi. And obviously, very quick, 1 or 2 sentences of Aishwarya. He's a robotics researcher from Michigan.
So my name is Aishwarya Patil, and I'm a graduate student at Michigan Tech University. And at DeepKapha, I'm working on some optimization techniques and using control strategy in optimization.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Aishwarya. So without much ado, I think let's get started. The video actually I chose is a very fascinating sort of a field of interest for me for almost 27, 28 years after I left university, spending years of learning. And I did not study neuroscience, I can tell you that. But I spent 27 years exploring it. So I can say I still kind of understand things about it. So I don't have a doctorate in neuroscience, more in a different field. So basically, this is what is also core of one of our other research in which we talk about data processing, as you see, passing through your retina and actually going through various parts of your brain, and not just your visual cortex. But we'll see how we go, because we have 90 minutes and probably now 80 minutes or something. And I want to take you quickly to this first section, as I mentioned. So, so our mission is actually to change the world literally by combining the three complex parts of the world that actually live in silos. That's enterprise world, you have research that is an isolated community, and philanthropy, or what I believe in is trying to contribute to the society is a field lost, is also kind of losing itself in lack of funding and all that stuff. So I decided, okay, I really want to do those three things because I believe in making change. It was a huge discussion with my COO because obviously it means that my brain is going to be frayed working and trying to do three different things. But I get a tremendous amount of energy doing from working on research and also philanthropy. So, well, basically the whole idea is to apply research in industry and give it back to the society so we can, try to teach and train every young student, people transitioning in career or struggling with cash to be able to fund their education. I didn't mention there was one student in our class day before yesterday who had huge sort of challenges, and he was not able to make it. And it's just even if I'm from Europe, it's like 25 euros or 30 euros to kind of you have a meal, and that was the amount that he had to kind of bridge to be part of that workshop. So we said, come on, I mean, we want this kid to be in the school. And so he traveled from Mysore. I'm not sure if he's here, but so I hope he got the insights. For many other experienced people like yourself, and we have the fortune of having gone to school, even moving forward to doing a doctorate and still have a reasonably good life. So I hope that every kid is able to do that with the best technical solution. I really think this is very key because otherwise we are actually lost trying to just solve a problem in a silo. So, okay, what kapha, people keep asking what that is. So I thought maybe I would put this up. It's one of these, three elements. So energy-based principles called doshas. So vata, pitta, and kapha. I think some of you are aware of it, right? Right. So I thought, so basically kapha is responsible for stability and for bodily perspective, responsible for keeping deep systems, internal deep systems in harmony. Its purpose is to bind things together. It's a practical example. Thank you. So, things like many conventional wisdoms, even in Europe actually, even in Indian Ayurvedic philosophy, for instance, they say about the gut feeling, right? So they say, my gut feeling says, I don't want to do this. So did you know that there is research done that the bacteria, there is a bacteria in your gut that directly affects your neuronal activities in your brain. So there is apparently some wisdom to it, which is probably lost through these thousands of years. So that binding basically is really extremely interesting, not just from a neuronal perspective, but also a genomic perspective. So we thought, at least I thought it made sense. The idea, why I think this is important, is we foresee there's going to be a huge shortage of skills in the next couple of years. Really, it will create a huge problem. The reason why this is happening is the companies like Google, and Facebook, Amazon, and these giants, and probably here also in India, are accumulating a lot of data. So there is no, they have services, you subscribe to those services, and then you have data which you sort of give it to these people who centralize that information in kind of siren servers. That's the term which I saw on the internet. It's interesting. So almost like those, mermaids kind of calling, luring the sailors to the shores. What this is going to lead to is that the enterprises are going to be extremely poor, while the and machine/deep learning poor, while these companies are going to be extremely wealthy, and they are getting wealthier. It's almost like it's an unstoppable train. I don't think they're comfortable about that either, to be very fair to people like Jeff Bezos or all these. I think they look at it also as, oh God, I mean, it's not really a nice equilibrium where we exist in, and they understand that as well. But I think the way only to solve it is to help, enable enterprises to get more data and skills richer. Fortunately, it's possible because I have been conducting workshops and training people personally around the world, and I have trained personally, but I think currently, including Mumbai and other places, we have already hit about 11,000 mark. Personally, classical training with workshops. And that is a huge feat just for one guy to do, I think. So I thought if I can do it, there are a lot of people can do it as well. Fortunately, the talent is there. So you are the talent. And how do we bring that talent to those industries? And our vision is to really bridge this gap. And our mission is we are driven to make it happen. So how are we going to do it? So we have three set of services. The first is AI solutions that is specifically focused on helping enterprises understand what is deep learning. Well, in some cases, they don't know much about it. In many cases, for instance, a chairman of a large multi-billion, 25 billion euro company, one of the world's largest telco companies in the world, I guess, then you can imagine what that is. Or at least in the yesteryears, they were huge. And so the chairman, sort of we connected through Silicon Valley network, and this guy himself has studied chairman, right? So he runs a security company as well. He owns and runs a security company up in the north of Europe, so you can kind of guess what that is. So he himself has studied mechanical industrial engineering, and he gave, I think, an hour and a half lecture on machine learning to his whole staff. So I don't know, what is 35, 40,000 employees, a chairman of a company. I said, this guy really kicks ass, and I want to work with him. So we connected, and we've trained their PhDs and postdocs and engineers from various disciplines, managing base stations to other new services. They bought a healthcare company, helping them understand how to use GPS data, location-based services. So I think for us, we work exclusively with CEOs and chairmen. That's how I work. So if we work with 5 or 6 chairman CEOs of $35 to $50 billion companies, how we are doing it now, that's the way we believe that we can make impact, because it's very easy to kind of push this information down to the organization. Obviously, from the other side, we also try to help the engineers understand how business interprets what AI or deep learning is, or misinterprets, and their role is to convert that information on collection of data on a specific service and bringing it back to the industry, bring it back to the business managers and create a proper business plan as if this was your own little internal startup. So I trained these people, and this exercise with the telco, we were able to kind of collectively create a business opportunity, including existing plus new solutions, almost up to 2.5 billion euros. So it makes a lot of sense if you make a sensible approach and try to resolve this problem holistically. If you try to solve them kind of more locally, you may gain some attention, but eventually it loses value, because if someone is doing facial or even emotion or other kind of detection based on parking services, for example, is an interesting solution in the beginning, but within a couple of weeks you say, well, yeah, it's not really working at scale. So that's why you need to kind of create business value and write business plans, et cetera. So we trained both of these guys in different skills, so this way we bridge internal gap in the enterprises. And obviously, research is what we believe is actually what drives value and the things that we are generating and creating, not just reusing from what is created on internet by research companies, is the way forward. So this is essentially the heart of DeepKapha, actually, if you will. Obviously, this doesn't make money on itself. It needs money to run these kind of operations. But we believe that this basically feeds into our vehicle of our for-profit, which is AI solutions. And this is a very important vehicle to do that. So we are currently in beta. I've written it alpha, but it's in beta. Rahi is not the only one who's onboarding. We have onboarded in US in Dallas also a researcher, and she is working on weather, but also not exosphere, but ozone layer data. And she actually won a prize, I think second prize or something on a presentation on a poster presentation a couple of weeks ago. Her name is Gayatri Iyer, and she's also joined at the same time. So the whole idea is we are onboarding people who have done research. Just to be very clear, many people have asked this question so often. So you are a researcher. When I say that, you could be an undergraduate with great ideas and intuitions and a bit of idea around scientific writing, because you need to be able to kind of create some kind of a logic to explain what you're trying to solve. And if you're underway with a solution that makes sense and has practical application of your in the industry in some form, we are very happy to welcome you on board to give you and help you accelerate your career. Work with us, not just at workshops like these, but also come and contribute to projects. So it is an interesting way to come on board. We collaborate with OpenAI. We are talking with a bunch of other institutions like the Blue Brain Project, which is a billion-dollar enterprise erected in Switzerland, and also Human Brain Project, which is in UK, also almost $1 billion sort of investment. So there's a lot of opportunities for you to grow if you have the basics, which is scientific rigor and idea that you can kind of post and launch. Okay, and this is obviously finally the sweet spot, at least for me. I really believe this is how you really change the world, is to go, actually, this is in Tunisia. I was in Tunisia a couple of weeks ago, and I think, well, you know, I can sit and build my company. Fortunately, my CEO is taking a lot of ownership and leadership, and I'm hoping that as we move, expand in regions, people will take a local and regional and maybe even national ownership of DeepKapha, and then I can sort of offload this and try to raise capital, you know, do things like what founders need to do is kind of continue to create value, and also do these things. I love this very much because this makes me really happy. These are very bright people with PhD, applied mathematics and theoretical physics background, really smart and great startup ideas. And we're working with these guys as well. Our reach currently is, we're expanding. This is still a few months old. I think we are expanding in China, Tunisia, Turkey, obviously Europe, and in the north of Europe, in Denmark and Finland, and well, not the whole of US, but more in the Silicon Valley, actually also towards in Dallas region. So there are some interesting things coming, and I didn't sketch Canada, so Canada is also coming. We'll be pretty soon, in a couple of months, opening our next sort of local center in Canada, in Toronto, so being closer to our friends there. Okay, this is how we kind of try to launch our solutions. So in this case, this is a humanitarian kind of approach in which we are working with Recoded, our partners who work in Turkey, Iraq, and Syria. And I thought, okay, so there are like, I don't know, 30, 40 kind of curriculums. So this is like a simple curriculum in which we do it in a week or 2 weeks. This is kind of this is a weekly program, but we can expand it, and we kind of take the learners from gentle introduction all the way to kind of creating, developing some kind of a solution. So it's a very dedicated sort of hands-on, and we work in the class not more than 20. I have my TAs who travel with me around the world, and we do dedicated workshops. We have you know, pretty good computing capacity in Google. So when we work, we give you state-of-the-art kind of training. It's not laptops. You know, we did a workshop 2 days ago, but when we give dedicated workshops to DeepKapha, you have full GPU capacity. In fact, you know, if you're able to have wrap up some little bit of cache, we also give you TPU capacity with the tensor processing units. So we have all that in Google. So we're partnering with Google as well. And these are the people. Rahi, you're going to notice I found something more about you than you being a doctorate. Not just because the photo is pretty, I mean, but I found out that, this is just this morning, I found out that Dr. Rahi is also very artistic, and I don't know if you're still running that venture. You are. So maybe in the Q&A you can answer that. So so this is actually a photograph in which she's holding a vase and she's kind of sketching on it. So she's pretty artistic as well. I really think that is really cool. because you have to be multifaceted person. I'm a musician as well. After my doctorate, I kind of traveled and I played music. I've showed a couple of photos yesterday to Aishwari and also to another friend of mine on, funny stuff. I'm not going to talk about it. But music is my thing. I write lyrics, I write poetry. So artistic and those things really make us more complete human beings. My COO, she's, by the way, my wife. I want to be very clear. Like Andrew's wife, she also runs one of his companies called Drive.ai. Focus, she's my wife. She's an artist as well. She's an illustrator, quite a popular illustrator in the Netherlands. And her work is amazing, actually. But again, also, when running a company, she's pretty diligent and she's operationally extremely tough lady. And I need that. I mean, I can be quite of a loose cannon, as she actually quite describes me sometimes. Okay, Recoded is a company working in Turkey, in Syria, Iraq, and we are going to Jordan and a couple of other places, and we are really expanding. Thousands of people have been trained, and this is really amazing. ThinkID are the people who I'm collaborating with in Tunisia, amazingly brilliant people, two young German, a bunch of guys, half German, half Libyan ethnicity, amazing people who have backing of Volkswagen and all these, BMW, sorry, not Volkswagen, BMW, and are creating talent there. We're working with these guys. With IBM, we have a partnership with the Watson team. We signed a partnership a couple of months ago. It was announced in the Think event in Las Vegas in March. You can look it up on the internet. March 2018. And FFDL, I don't know if anybody's aware of it. No, so it's Fabric for Deep Learning, in which they're trying to create all these sort of TensorFlow, PyTorch, and Chainer, and all that stuff, and bringing it all together in an open source library. And so they've asked us if we can work with these guys, not on that Fabric sort of layer, which is sort of consolidates that infrastructure part of your libraries, but potentially on creating a cognitive layer. Now, that is the sweet spot I'll talk about later, because that leads to us stitching a bunch of our algorithms, activation functions, and a bunch of other sweet things we are still cooking in our labs together on patent, and eventually next year, hopefully, in some kind of a very interesting software. Not to mention that my pre-money valuation goes through the roof when we do that. There's a huge sort of need for actually even in Europe, to try to keep those kind of patent that transform deep learning industry at scale, to keep those startups in Europe. So it's going to help us, and besides obviously the mathematical sort of calculation, I did a pre-money valuation post patent filing and registration, but that's going to really help us do some interesting things, fortunately. So our goal is to ramp up to at least about 80 to 100 people by the end of next year, just research. So let's see if we can reach that goal. So my partners in Finland are the ones where I'm launching another joint venture. I will talk about it very briefly. Academia, we're working with a bunch of academia, and HealthPrice is also a pretty big organization in which we are I was there last week, and I mentored about 40 startups, and some really amazing things happening. And next month, I'm going to be meeting the President Bill Clinton, a bunch of other people. As I was one of the judges there, I'm not going to be judging, but we'll have some sort of opportunity to meet some interesting people in New York next month, or actually this month, 15th of September. Naver Labs is another partner. We're working with these guys who are, manufacturer, who have developed Line, and a whole lot of things are coming. So I'll try to move faster to give you guys some more sort of things. This is fun. So Ellie is one startup that we are launching together with our Finnish partners. So basically, the whole idea of Ellie is that it's going to start consolidating your data and the taxonomies which you have of existing data. If you work with Oracle or SQL or any of those kind of data warehouses, you have taxonomies, you have all kinds of softwares and tools that done that. What we're trying to do is through Ellie. You can find Ellie.fi, but you can also we're moving right now Ellie to Ellie.ai, but Ellie.fi already exists, so it's still running in private beta. We're doing this project with a bunch of select customers to pilot and to learn from these guys. The other is also super interesting, where we are talking to a partner in US, where we have huge amount of data, almost 20 to 22 million patient data, of EHR plus also cardiovascular data. So we thought it was a great idea to actually launch a focused startup where we can bring medical community and actually just focus on a bunch of things. I think we're going to focus on lung, heart, so cardiovascular diseases, and potentially breast mass segmentation or breast cancer, and just focus on actually this region, and then eventually try to see if we can kind of create competitions. It's going to be very interesting. We want to do this next year, pretty soon. And what's going to happen is that we'll have similar competitions, although more focused and more refined. So Kaggle is still a place where you have a Jupyter Notebook and you do things, but we're going to create some kind of a curation system in which the solutions and the winner of the solutions will also have the responsibility not to just spit their code into a Jupyter Notebook and don't feel no responsibility to explain. So that's how the rating is going to go as well. So Kaggle for Healthcare is going to be really super interesting, and I would encourage you to take a look at that as well. All right, cool. A bunch of other companies we're going to be working with as well. Sure, yes. Sorry? What does it take to play? So we're going to be launching in November. We were supposed to launch, I wanted to do a demo, but we realized it's going to take a bit of a time. And we are definitely going to, please reach out to me if you want to get into a beta program. I believe you're at Oracle. So please, we're very happy to get you into our beta/pilot program, and very happy to let you explore as well. So you can reach out to me, but if you feel, you just have to wait a couple of weeks, and then we launch it internationally. Okay, so much for the introduction. I just want to make sure, looking at the timekeeping, that I'm not eating up all the time in this introduction. So we're signing up MOUs, and this is what a basic introduction is of helping. Basically, the whole idea is to help you maintain your discovered AI algorithms and take also and create taxonomies that don't exist today, but they exist in your notebooks and in your code. But these taxonomies of deep learning and machine learning are essential if you start taking your projects and create projects that have pipelining and that need to be maintained, that need to be run. You need to understand what you're talking about in terms of data sets, data class, libraries, classes, and all these things. So we really need to kind of create an enterprise solution. That's what Ellie wants to do. And eventually the plan is also to create Ellie and develop Ellie as a conversational Ellie. The more she learns about your data, it might also start giving you suggestions as to, well, this information is there, and why don't you do this, etc. So that's sort of in the roadmap. So it took a bit of a while. I think I see already I ate 24 minutes. My apologies for that. I'm going to kind of go quick into this, and then I want to give you ample time for Q&A. So I think I'll take another 10-15 minutes max, and then we're going to move into the mode of research. So okay, so the whole idea of this is research. Why is it important? So you've seen this stuff. So all companies have been kind of projecting AI is huge and all that stuff. I don't necessarily agree with everything that is kind of, this is an extensive report for a couple of years ago. I think, for instance, if you look at the automated image diagnosis, there's a lot work going on potentially, but I guess, in terms of annual value by 2026, people still see that and has not much potential. I disagree there. But I guess, yeah, so that's something which is, you take it with a pinch of salt, depending on if it's a Gartner report or a Forrester, they have a different projection. One thing is for sure that it's really important that we need to do this. These are one of the partners in autonomous vehicles. So I believe there's no audio here, so I'll just run it on my laptop. So this is, we're working with these guys. It's really interesting. The reason why I'm showing you this while you watch this, I'll kind of entertain you with the probably interesting information. We're going to be working with the French President, Emmanuel Macron. It's a French company, the Naver Labs. It was bought by Naver. That's a Korean company. It's a multi-billion-dollar company that has launched Line and all this software, which people in APAC, even in Japan, use a lot of them. So we are going to be there on the 17th of September, and there's a huge old railway station that's converted into an AI massive lab. And my strategy of really connecting the world. So the Tunisian, as you know, are French-speaking sort of population. All these brilliant people I'm bringing into this lab. And we're going to we'll be going to be hosting a bunch of workshops, and the president is also going to be around. He's super sort of exciting guy, really interested in pushing AI. I think they've been putting about 10 billion euros to run that. So this is and this small video is probably also
AI
interesting
is going to impact many fields.
because this is why
I want to give you a couple of examples today.
I hope you can hear this.
Healthcare is one of the most important fields AI is going to transform. Last year, we announced our work on diabetic retinopathy. It's a leading cause of blindness, and we use deep learning to help doctors diagnose it earlier. And we've been running field trials since then at Aravind and Sankara hospitals in India, and the field trials are going really well. We are bringing expert diagnosis to places where trained doctors are scarce. It turned out, using the same retinal scans, there were things which humans quite didn't know to look for, but our AI systems offered more insights. Your same eye scan turns out holds information with which we can predict the 5-year risk of you having an adverse cardiovascular event, heart attack or strokes. So to me, the interesting thing is that more than what doctors could find in these eye scans, the machine learning systems offered newer insights. This could be the basis for a new non-invasive way to detect cardiovascular risk. And we just published the research, and we are going to be working to bring this to field trials with our partners. Another area where AI can help is to actually help doctors predict medical events. Turns out doctors have a lot of difficult decisions to make, and for them, getting advance notice, say 24 to 48 hours before a patient is likely to get very sick, has a tremendous difference in the outcome. And so we've put our machine learning systems to work. We've been working with our partners using de-identified medical records. And it turns out if you go and analyze over 100,000 data points per patient, more than any single doctor could analyze, we can actually quantitatively predict the chance of readmission 24 to 48 hours before, earlier than traditional methods. It gives doctors more time to act. We are publishing our paper on this later today, and we are looking forward to partnering with hospitals and medical institutions.
Just need to put it back. So I guess, okay, so this, the reason why I wanted to show you this is it's really super important. Then I'll give you a really quick rundown, just breeze through this. You may have heard these things. So NVIDIA working with Canon. So this is not just Google doing this work. So NVIDIA is also working with GE to supply a bunch of hardware and solutions in radiology in this case. Skin cancer detection is kind of a little bit known even in the deep learning industry now, but there's more happening. And you need more computing power that we realize, and also a lot of images. So a lot of sort of proprietary data is also being collected in medical institutions that people are using that. Tuberculosis as well. There's a bunch of research going on. Detecting brain bleeding, stroke is one of the areas where we work with Charité Medical College, one of the top institutes in the world. Actually, one is the top institute in the world. Post Second World War, Charité was built. In fact, even before, to actually work on brain research for a long, long time. Alzheimer's. All this is happening, and that's why I want to emphasize on this, and you're going to kind of be overwhelmed with this. There's a lot of work going on based on this research. So researchers have been working on this in the last couple of years to develop solutions. Most are private, some have been open sourced. For instance, here, the first one, DeepBind, is predicting the sequences, specifics of DNA and RNA bindings of proteins by deep learning. I know one of the main authors and also researcher there, and really interesting project there. So as you can see, there's all these architectures, CNN, RNN have been used in just functional genomics, a whole lot. Sequence data analysis, also a bunch of work has been done. And so let's take a look. Medical diagnostics, as you know, you've seen a bunch of stuff happening there as well. So there's a lot happening. I don't know if people are kind of paying attention to this, because I did create a GitHub repository where I started collecting data because not much was happening, and it's one of sort of the most sort of downloaded and or forked repository just because I just kind of aggregated this information. I keep doing that on a daily basis. So it's something I just sort of feel I'm super inclined to work in this area. So I said, why not, kind of educate myself as well? Because I'm not a pathologist, I'm not a radiologist, dermatologist, but I can say with confidence that it's helping me learn things of another domain where I was kind of hopeless at when I was in high school. But it's really super. So medical diagnostics, as you can see, is really, really huge. The way you can get in, I don't know how many people compete. Do people compete as well on Kaggle here? Is there anyone? Yeah, actively competing?
Not actively. I've tried 1 or 2 competitions and then stopped.
Okay. I think it's very good anyways to observe. How many people observe, watch what's happening on a regular kind of basis? Great. I think most of the people should watch. So Kaggle, after post-Google acquisition, may not be hosting too many competitions. It just kind of, it's owned by now a larger company. But it is definitely still an interesting repository. And that's why we are moving to creating our own, well, we are calling it healthily.ai. So I can just kind of tell you guys what that Kaggle for healthcare is going to be called. It's going to be called healthily.ai. That's going to be the platform where we're going to have a very sophisticated kind of a Jupyter notebook. We're using a really cool idea which guys at Netflix use to internally work and train their engineers. So that notebook where you will be kind of suggested to create your solution, also schematically explain why you chose it and things like that. And that will be also an important criteria for win the competition. The prize money is going to be something like 100,000 euros for the winner, 75 second, 50K for number 3. So we're adding good cash to that ball game. So Mura is one competition. You should check it up. It's really interesting. How many people are aware of this? Just a few. So I would like you to check this out. 2017 was pretty cool. I think I've also kind of participated in that competition. Super cool. I didn't have enough time. I don't know how many people were there in the workshop. I wanted to show the 3D also lung cancer research. Really super interesting where you use 3D convolutions. Really, really interesting. My accuracy was like, I think 63, 64%, so not that good. So, but scope for improvement, that's great. This year is 3D lung cancer nuclei, spotting a nuclei, and maybe this video should be more informative for the ones
data play a part in accelerating the
who want to jump into this field.
What if you could harness the power of data science to change the quality of life, to change the world? The 2018 Data Science Bowl needs you. We are searching for thinkers, artists, and inquirers to do just that. Thousands of change agents from all over the globe. One goal, 90 days. The challenge, build an algorithm that spots the...
Why? Because quick and correct identification of... How can data play a part in accelerating the ability to find cures? What if you could harness the power of data science to change the quality of life, to change the world? The 2018 Data Science Bowl needs you. We are searching for thinkers, artists, and inquirers to do just that. Thousands of change agents from all over the globe. One goal, 90 days. The challenge? Build an algorithm that spots the nucleus of a cell. Why? Because quick and correct identification of a cell's nucleus enhances drug development, advances medical treatment, which improves health outcomes, and ultimately improves quality of life. Harness your passion, unleash your curiosity, and affect change on a global scale. Spot nuclei, speed cures. Accept the challenge to make a real difference, impact lives, change the world.
The first competition was $1 million, 2017, right? This year probably the price is a little bit less. I think $500,000 or something. Bose Allen Hamilton, a bunch of other guys kind of joined forces and they get sponsorship on board. That's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be onboarding healthcare companies to raise capital and try to put most of that capital back to you who are developing this and creating this solution. So this is something you really should get into, not just for the money, but also for the learning and getting a wider adoption. Who knows what you're going to come up with? You're going to come up with a solution. People did that. Skin cancer detection, when skin cancer detection started, was like 4 or 5 years ago, one of the Dutch companies, and I don't know if I did that experiment, and I did that in Mumbai, and I know the CEO of this company, it's called Skin Vision. They were one of us, one of you guys. So the CEO was a previously head of healthcare at Philips. And this guy ramped up a bunch of guys, said, okay, you know, we have a lot of data, we have already trained data sets, and let's take this competition and start kind of developing this model. Eventually, they launched the companies, the leading companies in your world. They're positioned in lifestyle management and monitoring, fair enough. I think would be interesting to also be there, but they want to they raised 15 million. They are really going super fast, and you know, and they're getting into that predictive kind of that graph that you saw. I think that is the future. Believe me, if right now people are still sort of focused on doing image classification, it's great. You want to enhance your skill, you should do that. I do that too on a daily basis. But I do want you to think that you should kind of take it up and bring it out on a higher level if you want to do that. So if you want to do a startup, I'd suggest do that. Anyway, so a lot of talk about what's happening in the world and all those promises that I say, but someone's got to do some work as well. And so that's what I want to change as well. You know, talk is cheap, and you've been here. I saw a bunch of guys walking away. I hope it was for some other reasons, but it's okay. I mean, you know, I want, even if 10 people stay here, and out of those 10% have 100% conversion rate or accuracy, then we already have created a new ecosystem. So for me, the most important thing is not drawing large crowds, but doing meaningful work. I'm personally fascinated by this world because I think that the field of deep learning is and can be enhanced if you understand more about our brain. I'm very fascinated about it. So my fascination just leads me to dive into the depths of those 80 million neurons and understand 80 billion neurons and understand what's happening. So there's a lot of information. So we're moving into the research section now. So what are we doing? And yeah, I'll just breeze through this, and then I want Rahi to spend a good amount of time explaining about ARiA. So what May is head of research for DeepKapha, one of the most brilliant scientists, neuroscientists I've ever met and worked with. So she did her master's thesis, and she wanted to understand about the thalamic, or basically the data that passes into your thalamus. And then she wrote this paper on intrathalamic and thalamocortical connectivity. It was her thesis. So I said, okay, we want to work together. Let's do something and try to see what we can learn from this and what can we improve in deep learning. So basically, the three basically simple the themes of this paper is that there's more to the thalamus. Thalamus has been previously understood to be just a primary relay center, meaning data comes in, and that's the video that you saw, and all you see is that your neocortex is just taking those projections from inverse graphic and you're seeing some things. Well, that's not true. So we say there's more to the thalamus. And the intrathalamic and thalamocortical circuitry basically has implications on early stage visual processing. What this means is visual processing should not just be led to and we should rely on the visual cortex, or the neocortex, but all that data that is essentially sort of either settled across various parts of the thalamic region in subdued, excitatory, or inhibitory form. So those are the things she went out to do. And it does have, so basically the relay and the compression in artificial neural networks can lead to deep learning models with much higher performance than they are today. The biophysics behind the cortical hierarchies in deep learning as well is very important. Capsule networks, for those who may not know and are beginning to kind of explore the adjacencies around capsule networks, is actually based on that. It's not the feed forward and back prop, as Jeffrey Hinton also mentioned in his bunch of lectures in the last couple of years. There's very different forms of learning. Circular representation learning is a paper he wrote in 1987. Capsule paper, I think I spoke a little bit briefly in the class as well. It has its application in 1981 when he wrote a paper being super inspired by David Marr's beautiful book, phenomenal and seminal book called Vision, where he wanted to combine the world of actually bioinformaticians and the field of computer vision. Well, lack of data led to all these, unfortunate AI ventures. But thankfully, data is coming. So basically, I will just, kind of spare you the details. I can understand that, if you would not been playing around with neuroscience, it's not really so, it's a bit too many sort of conceptual terms. Just very simply, the previously held notion was the thalamus is a passive relay center for transmission of sensory information to the cortex. So recent, basically, evidence has challenged this traditional view. So you have basically a lateral or LGN. Let's just keep calling LGN and PGN pathways. So that's the visual part of the dorsal thalamus. And the study, basically what it did is that it took a multi-compartmental models incorporating LGN principal relay cells, interneurons, and PGN reticular cells implemented on a platform called Neuron. Neuron, you can find on GitHub, is maintained by the neuroscientists from Blue Brain, I think one or two engineers, neuroscience engineers from Blue Brain, guys from Human Brain Project as well from London. And so you can play with it yourself. I have some stuff on my GitHub as well. If you check into the folders of neuroscience, you'll find it. Really interesting. If you kind of feel bored, you want to explore something else and feed your brain with some interesting information, I encourage you to do that. I mean, we need more people to also get into this model. So the whole idea, so neurons in LGN and PGN were built in a multi-compartmental Hodgkin-Huxley type kinetic model. So basically, well, complex term again, but what this simply means is, I wrote it down here, it's basically just a conductive kind of model. So basically, we try to understand the executory and the spiking of the neurons and all those activities. So the Hodgkin-Huxley kinetic model basically means is that it describes the action of potential neurons that are initiated and propagated. So just think about it, the propagation of neurons and the data, whether it is feed forward or back prop. This is where we start kind of seeing pretty interesting information. The method, so biologically detailed modeling, as you can see here archaically stacked up. You have LGN, your principal relay center, PGN reticular cells, as I mentioned, and then we use the virtual retina from the neuron platform to generate inputs from images to feed to the model. What this led us, obviously the topologies we used were, if you were in the class, I explained a little bit about simple, complex, and hypercomplex cells in our brain. So basically, you can have a simple topology, or you can have a topology of LGN, PGN loop without the modulated productions from visual cortex, or you have a topology of LGN, PGN cortex loop. So I showed a bunch of biophysical, anatomical, I think, lectures in my capsule just 2 days ago. So you're very happy to share others, a different slide on Capsule Networks where you can sort of see the correlation. So here, basically, what we did was we started using sinusoidal drafting gratings of varying contrast. A similar thing, which I think, if you saw in the video, was talking about that, showing kind of flash or bar to a cat when Dr. Hubel or Dr. Wiesel did back in the 1950s, that inspired actually CNNs because of learning about edge detection, which is what you do on a daily basis with your CNN. Anyway, so 0, 10, 40, 100%, or 10 to 20 triads for each, and flashing point spots of varying sizes were given. So this is how basically, so what it basically led to us to believe is that larger stimulus causes reduction in principal relay cell activities. Simply, again, the concept I explained, I will not go in too much detail. When you see a lot of information, the brain consolidates and basically synthesizes and compresses that information, leading to less spiking in neuron firings, but still being able to process a much larger complex scene. So that's what happened. It's kind of, okay, so this was a great way to kind of validate that. And, well, this is a bit of an introduction. You can download this paper, by the way. It's on ACM, and I will soon be putting this up on archive. Okay, so the topology I spoke about, and essentially the conclusion is that the complexity and the connectivity of neurons in a network model shape information processing. So you have point neuron model or models of insufficient complexity may not produce plausible responses, okay? So neurons deal with visual stimulus differently. That's super important. Now this is what we wanted to find out, and this is what we found out. There's a bunch of researchers, and people are doing a lot in the Blue Brain or Human Brain projects. You should read those research. It's amazing stuff. The only thing is, unfortunately, neuroscience and deep learning worlds are still apart. So my and May's goal is that we want to bring these disciplines closer and closer. You know, Dr. Marr's vision in the 70s and the 80s. Well, we don't say we are thought bears. There are much smarter and much brilliant people who do that, but we want to do it in our own little way. Thalamus does more than relaying sensory information. So irrelevant information is filtered out on the way to cortical layers. I mean, information theory has also explained in many ways how this works. There has been also working with Dr. Naftali Tishby, one of the very top scientists from Hebrew University, who challenged actually Hinton's, not Hinton's, but who basically challenged deep learning sort of theory and traveled across the world talking about actually bottleneck analysis. It's a very interesting sort of research from information theory perspective.
Tarry, this filtering, how would you even detect it in the biology? Yes, you can detect this in your artificial neurons. How do they detect this in biology? What's the signal that you...
So basically, just observing from your, the fMRI actually data, the experimental data. So that's how you were able to. I don't know.
If it's in the paper, I'll...
Yes, please take a look at it. And
that part is there.
yes, it definitely is there. So you can, yes, and you can see that the curve of the virtual retina and the experimental data of the visual processing inside the brain from the real cases, they were very, very, I think it is here. Yeah. So as you can see, I don't know if you can see clearly, you have the blue and the red lines, and these are pretty, quite similar and following each other. So please, I encourage you to read that paper. Please come back to me if you find it interesting, because this is really, the implications, okay, we spoke about it. And this is sort of, the next part is my part of this paper, in which I wanted to bring the insights from deep learning, from neuroscience into deep learning. If anybody has followed, this company is doing a lot of work. So we think it's interesting what they explained about. It's basically about hierarchical temporal memory. So essentially, it's about the memory. So now think about it for a second. So there's information that stays in different parts of your brain and probably is well or not processed. But the part of your hypothalamus is basically capturing information. So you're still processing and decision making based on much more complex sort of dimension than just sort of using this visual processing neocortex, right? So you should read this. So basically they're trying to describe that actually we are here. We try to create non-linearities. We try to create all these sort of artificial and hidden layers. But essentially we are here. This is how biological neurons is. And they were trying to compare, and there's a lot of RNN stuff as well if you explore this a little bit. And you will see that the HDM neuron is actually interesting. It's an interesting piece of research. And on the right is where I explained also briefly 2 days ago in the workshop is when we are processing information in our brain, it happens on those where the simple, complex, or hypercomplex cells. And our eyes can identify with very limited data, sparse data, and you can do object detection. So tonic meaning you're getting used, your neurons get used to that information, and essentially you already know, well, what that thing is. And the burst mode is when you're, presented with very interesting information, then you have spiking activities. There are lots of research being done lately, and this is like very interesting field. The most important thing to know is that rapid object detection takes less than 200 milliseconds of viewing duration to already know that. This research has been done in Caltech University. I forgot the name of the professor. Just a couple of months ago, I was talking to Caltech. And this is really, really cool. And now this, if you have anybody interested in improving working with capsule networks, what you can see is the transformation objects such as rotation, tilt, position, size, change happens already. So we know this. It's an observable fact. It happens in less than 200 milliseconds in the brain, in the ventral stream of a macaque monkey. Really, they did a lot of experiments as well. So I think I have a paper somewhere in which they were showing similar faces to a macaque. The monkey already knew. A little similar. So my face and just make a little bit of a variation. And this guy was able to do it in less than 200 milliseconds. Probably even faster than the deep learning neural networks where they see, like, is it a fake video or not. I think I saw one research published just in the morning about fake. So please pay attention. You could spend a lot of time, which I think, I forgot the name of the gentleman, Malhotra. Yeah, who gave a keynote. Was it last evening or the day before? That, there's a lot of intuition, actually, and a lot of computing power being put into deep learning. But intuition and also learnings from biologists and neuroscientists can give us really interesting results. So we should learn from them and not just keep adding compute capacity to our neural networks and blindly start doing these mathematical sort of computations on a computer. So please really think about it. That's why I really think this is really cool. I know that the time is really short, so I'm going to kind of put a stop at this and would like to introduce Rahi to explain about the Richards curve, which I think I see Madhura is here as well. Yeah. Hi, Madhura. Welcome. So she's also the co-author. She just flew in the morning. I know there were a bunch of problems, but we're really happy to have you here. And Narendra is also a brilliant researcher in Michigan, and he's quite amazing guy. He was not able to make it. and the three of them have written this paper. So I will give it over to you. Please take it away. And what we're going to do after this little explanation of ARiA, which is amazing, we're going to take questions. So the three of us will do our best to answer your questions.
So hi, everyone. I introduced about myself at the start, so I'll not go into that again. So this is the function that we came up with in May 2018. That paper is already on arXiv. And we call the function ARiA, which is sort of a short form for adaptive Richards curve weighted activation. So what the idea is very basic, very simple. We have taken a function which is very popular in biology, which is called as Richards curve. It's basically used for modeling the growth in biological entities. So starting from mammalian growth to how leaves are grown, how the population grows, how plants grow, this particular model is, or this particular curve is used in a lot of things. So this is one of the papers which talks about how Richards curve is used for mammalian growth. Then here, how the prey population in a particular region changes and how that can be modeled using Richards curve. So essentially, this function is what we have used to design an activation family of functions. So I'll go back a little bit towards, at the beginning. So the traditional activation functions that we all know, we have all used, even before ReLU, these were all very popular. So they were essentially sigmoid, tanh, and a standard step function. Now the problem, they were very simple to implement. They were very useful to a certain extent at the beginning of machine learning, deep learning revolution. But the problem with this was because of the asymptote. So you can see the three of the functions, and you can see that they either asymptote at some -1 to 1, or some other value depending on how the function is defined. The problem because of this asymptote and this it gets stable at certain point was very important, and that is termed in a specific way as vanishing gradient. So to handle the problem with vanishing gradient, people came up with a function which we all still use, which is very popular and which is very computationally less expensive, and this is ReLU. So this is your rectified linear unit. Now, if you look at the curve, you can see that it does not asymptote at all, especially in the first quadrant. And in the third quadrant, there is no value. So the function definition is max of 0 and x. So if the problem with this now is, if let us say that your function, the weights are initially randomly initialized. Now the weights, if they are initialized in the negative region, in the negative, very small in the negative side, what happens in that case? Then there is no output, because whatever is the weight, it is the maximum, it is less than 0 always. And in that case, the output of that particular neuron will always be 0. And in such cases, when you sort of take, in back propagation, if you take the weights backwards, the gradient does not flow through those neurons. And then that is the problem with ReLU, which is termed as dying neuron. Another problem which is less pertinent but also important is exploding gradients. So as opposed to having an asymptote, now in the first quadrant, if you see, ReLU just keeps on increasing. So there is no bound on the value. So it just keeps on exploding, and it keeps on increasing, and the weights at a certain stage may just explode. And then in that case, your function and your whole system, your model does not work as you want it to be. And that's the reason why in 2017, November, Google Brain actually came up with an idea to generate the activation functions. So what they did was very interesting. They sort of took lots and lots of mathematical operators, plus, minus, logarithm, tan, and some logarithmic functions, some tanh, trigonometric functions. So mathematical functions and some operators, they all threw them together and applied a very basic grid search. And then they came up with some functions, which is a combination of these things, which were doing the best. And out of that, they decided, or they have reported, that a function that they call as swish. So the definition of swish is x into sigmoid of beta x. So what is different here, as compared to the usual sigmoid function, is that introduction of parameter beta. So that parameter is basically the main reason why Swish has been reported to do better than ReLU, ELU, and leaky ReLU, and all the other activation functions. And it has been reported in the paper that Google Brain has. That paper is also available on arXiv. No, but this is not a great way, no, to find an activation function. Because if you have huge amount of computational power, like obviously Google has, then this kind of approach works. It's like a brute force approach. So you have lots and lots of, you can apply lots and lots of grid search with different types of operators and come up with a function that does best for your type of data. So the problem with this was, this is not really the great way to go forward. Another problem with this is, just one more thing is that this X in the equation is your raw pre-activation. So actual value of raw pre-activation into sigmoid of beta X. So by tuning this beta, what they did was they tuned this beta, and the reason why ReLU is underperforming than Swish is probably twofold. One is because there is this little, if you can see, there is this little, non-monotonous curvature in the third quadrant. So basically, now as compared to ReLU, you're not really, outputting a 0. You're outputting a negative value, but still there is some value. And looking at this, you can also see that that function then later on asymptotes to 0. So essentially, there was a difference between ReLU and this function. The one difference was this non-monotonous curvature in the third quadrant. And second was the derivative plot. So if we are applying any activation function, the main thing that we are interested in is the derivative plot of a function because of the gradient descent and because of the basically the slope that we want to focus on. So ReLU is discontinuous at value 0, the derivative of ReLU, I mean. And as opposed to that, for Swish, you can see that the curve is actually not, it is not really discontinuous, it is a continuous function. And that actually has helped, as far as Google has reported in their paper, that the reason probably that this is doing better than the other things. So, but as I said, the problem was, because of the single hyperparameter, the shape of the curve was only controllable in a very coarse way, in a certain sense. And another problem was, again, as I said, this is a very brute force way. So if you have very less computational power, it's very difficult to sort of, come up with your own activation function. So then we were doing some work with, for some other project, and we were studying for logistic sigmoid function. And then going back into the mathematical literature, we realized that logistic sigmoid is actually a subset or a special function which is derived from Richards curve. So it's a special case of Richards curve. And then we thought, why not? Let us try and see if we can use actual Richards curve and see whether we can tune the parameters which are there in the Richards curve, and we are getting a better result than the other functions, especially ReLU and Swish both. So just to give you the definition, y of t is a plus k minus a divided by c plus q e raised to minus bt raised to 1 upon nu. So now these are just some of the parameters, and I have defined them in the function, what each parameter means. So what the experimentation what we did was we actually kept one parameter changing, and we kept rest of the other parameters constant. And we saw how that will change the Richards curve to begin with, and how that will change our function. So our function, which we are calling ARiA, is this one. So this is ARiA is x into y of t. So the function is the product of raw pre-activation into the Richards curve. Now Richards curve, as I said, I have already defined, and it's also given there. So y of t is the equation for Richards curve. Now I'll show in the later slides that ReLU and Swish, they are special cases of Richards curve. So we are basically, what we are trying to do here is we are trying to generate a mother of all the activation functions and providing lots and lots of flexibility in terms of using the parameter that you feel is the most appropriate for your particular application. So this is where we changed only C, keeping all the other parameters constant. So on this and next few slides, on the left-hand side, you have the Richards curve by changing a specific parameter. And on the right-hand side, you have the ARiA function with change in only that parameter. So you can see that with change in each parameter, for example, in this case C, there has been a little curve, a bump, which has been introduced in the third quadrant. And that is what Swish is already doing. But, so this is second one, which is Q. So on the left-hand side, you have Richard's curve, and on the right-hand side, you have the ARiA with change in Q values. Again, you can see that the function, with the change in Q values, you can see that there is a little bit bump introduced, and that bump changes with the value as the value of Q changes. Similarly, the slope of the curve changes in the first quadrant with the value of Q, change in the value of Q. So we did this for also for K and A, and then for B, and then for nu. So this is basically just the consolidation of all the previous slides. So now, what you have here is basically a complete range of functions which you can, by changing just one parameter or combination of parameters, you can then find your own activation function. But obviously, I mean, tuning 5 or 4 such parameters, hyperparameter tuning, is not really what anyone wants to do. So then we thought, okay, why not try and see whether we can identify only 1 or 2 parameters which are doing the best and which are actually doing the job of what we want, how to control the curve. So what we tried and do was we combined individually different parameters. And if you can see in the curve, that what we want here is, if you look at this particular curve, the function actually asymptotes to 0, but it takes longer time. Then if you look at this curve, the slope of the curve in the third quadrant and in the first quadrant, it changes differently. So what we wanted to have is the combination of 2 parameters which can control the shape of the curve both in the first quadrant and in the third quadrant. Secondly, it should asymptote to 0 quickly, not take too long a time. And at the same time, we can actually find whether there is a special case of this particular activation which we can manifest into ReLU and Swish. So these are the 2 parameters that we thought is beta or B and nu. So I'll just go back to the definition. If you look at the curve here, curve equation here, what we basically did is we only changed beta and nu, and in combination, we are changing those 2 parameters, and we are calling that particular version of ARiA as ARiA 2. So it's only 2 parameter version of ARiA, keeping all the other parameters either 0 or 1. So the function, no, it should be x, yt. When I say y of t, it basically means it's the definition of Richard's curve. But it's basically y of x. Yeah, so it's basically x, sigmoid of beta x raised to minus alpha. So Swish is a special case of ARiA, which is manifested at ARiA equal to f of x. So 1, 0, 1, 1, b, and 1. So all these parameters are values of k, c, and q, and b and nu. So that's basically the sequence. And ReLU is a special case of ARiA, which is manifested at x, 1, 0, 1, 1, beta tends to infinity, and then 1. So basically what we are trying to do is we are trying to find a whole, as I said in the beginning, a mother of activation functions, a whole complete family of activation functions, which then you can use individually, change single parameter or different parameters or combination of 2 parameters to get better results. Again, we have tried this ARiA 2 for different benchmark data sets. So as I said, we tried to see which of the 2 parameters are doing the best job, especially in the region of significance. So region of significance is the small area around the y-axis. So that's where your weights are initialized to begin with in every model. So as I said, that is ARiA 2 that we are calling ARiA 2. And we have tried it with benchmark data sets, MNIST, CIFAR 10, and CIFAR 100. Now, obviously, MNIST, you cannot go beyond what is already available. But still, we got a little bit of better performance. That is not, it is better than Swish, but the difference is not too high. But in case of CFAR 10 and CFAR 100, we got a result improvement in the classification prediction accuracy by about 3%. So that, and in addition to only using different data sets, we also tried different layers for a model, then different numbers of epochs, then different types of architectures. So actually we tried MNIST on DenseNet and our custom design CNN. We tried CFAR 10 and 100 on wide ResNet and custom CNN. And in all these, irrespective of all these details, the function is doing better. So we have got as far as about 3% accuracy in CFAR 10 and 100. So ARiA, and when I say 3% accuracy, I'm comparing with ReLU and Swish both. And since Swish has already been compared with other activations, we didn't go into that because that's just repetition of work. Now, again, for people who don't have enough computational power, because even with the kind of power that we had, we struggled with changing 2 parameters. So for people who don't have that much power, we are saying that ARiA 1 is the way forward. So ARiA 1 is only changing 1 hyperparameter, or only setting 1 hyperparameter, and that parameter we have identified is alpha, or nu, in the equation for Richards curve. So that is the parameter which is like an exponential of 1 upon 1 plus e raised to beta x. In that beta, you keep it as 1, and then you change this alpha, which is 1 upon nu. And this we are calling as ARiA 1. So these are some of the things that we have tried. So on benchmark datasets, as I said, MNIST, we have tried with DenseNet and custom CNN. CFAR 10 and CFAR 100, we tried with WRNet and custom CNN. And ImageNet, we have tried with a standard, with a custom CNN. Now, this was a benchmarking. Obviously, we wanted to see whether this function is actually doing better on rest of the other datasets also. So we tried applying this for medical imaging problem for classification of specific type of brain tumors, which are called as gliomas. And we applied VGG16 architecture for that. Even there, we got about 6% higher accuracy as compared to ReLU and Swish. Similarly, we are right now in the process of trying this for tumor segmentation in using UNets. And we are pretty confident that we'll be getting decent results. We are also doing that for genomic predictions of classifications and prediction tasks in genomics, especially using RNN. And in the real world projects, what we are trying to do is to apply this function for some of the products which are in pipeline, and how to implement ARiA as part of the different products that we are planning at DeepKapha. So future plans, will be releasing the code for ARiA soon. So it will be open for people to use and experiment with. So as I said, you can change parameters in a way you want. You can set the parameters in a way you want. As a rule of thumb in the paper also, we have reported that we have observed in the experiments that we have carried out that alpha at about 1.5 and beta at 1, 2, or 5 does the better job as compared to other values of alpha, which are between 1 and 1.5. So that's what I'm saying, that you can use this, you can try different parameter combination and test the performance. Now, one more thing that I would like to highlight here is that we would really love to have the trainable hyperparameters. But again, it all comes down to computational power. So what we did when we were experimenting was we decided that, okay, we want intuitively some values of alpha and beta. So we changed the values of beta from 1, 2, 5, and 10. And correspondingly, keeping beta value constant, we changed the values of alpha from 0.1, 0.5, 1, 1.5, and 2. So we ran these many tests for different combinations of beta alpha. But ideally, it would be best to have a hyperparameter which can be which is a trainable hyperparameter. And this is something people can try depending on the kind of computational power that you have, that you can make 1 upon nu, which is basically alpha, your trainable hyperparameter. So that's about ARiA, and thank you so much. Yeah. Yes. 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 Yeah, so the plot that I have shown you here, just go back, yeah. So what we basically tried to do was to see how the function is doing by changing a specific hyperparameter, how that is doing in the first quadrant and in the third quadrant. So it should not actually, decrease or increase the slope together. It should do it independently. At the same time, it should change the slope in both the first quadrant and in the third quadrant. At the same time, it should not, keep on asymptoting for a long time. It should asymptote to a 0 value in the third quadrant in a reasonable amount of time, maybe just after the region of significance, as we are calling, -5 to +5. So, so we tried different combinations. I'm not saying that we arrived at this. We looked at the plots, and then we thought, okay, intuitively these values or these two parameters can do better. We tried some other combinations also, but alpha beta gave us the best results. And that's the reason that we are saying that ARiA 2 is something that one can try at the start as a reference point.
So I think we can, I just want to very quickly, please stay here, Rahi. So I just want to organize the Q&A. We have 15 minutes left, I'm told. So we want to take all the questions. So, general stuff about DeepKapha. I just want to actually quickly open the slide and show you what we are cooking. That's very important for you to know. So it's not just that we are stuck with this. With Capsule Networks, we are creating a CapsNet Plus model in which we are using a PGM or probability graph model. We are going to be introducing manifold learning. There's a lot of work going on, a lot of bumps on the road. We have had to change our strategy in the last couple of weeks. I realized one of our developers, Capsule Network researcher Huadong Liao from China, he's made some interesting breakthroughs, so he's testing code. So this is all going to be coming also pretty soon on CapsNet. So this is something really interesting that you should pay attention to. Our website is going to be launching in just a couple of minutes, actually. So I have had a really crazy week. And so fortunately, things are going well. Content, I created content, and I realized that I was probably the worst person to have been asked to write content. So people had to rework all that stuff. You will find this information there. I can show you, I'll open up the staging site page for the website so I can show you what we mean. Here, obviously, the tying and building and stitching and knitting and creating a pattern as well as eventually software, as Rahi alluded to, and also, eventually creating customized solutions for AI for our customers who are, asking that, okay, great, so why can't we take it? Can we adopt it? Which part of the IP do you own? What do I get? So those are interesting conversations. So we're also creating flexible. So flexibility of the growth curve is where we are trying to. So ARiA is essentially, creating complexity and managing the complexity of the flexibility in nonlinearity. Now, just to think about it, that is how nature is, right? Nature creates things, trees, that's how, for example, how the growth models are. They are extremely dissimilar to each other. And this Richards curve and several other functions have been used. And also, people have introduced new equations based on Richards curves. And also, in some cases, actually 2 to 4 parameters and more to understand a leaf growth area of maize or other things that are potentially possible, such as even predator-prey model, etc., which we had on the slides. We quickly brushed through. So basically, AutoLearn is sort of we are calling it a Lego. I will open up the website after this just to give you a bit of an idea. It looks actually pretty cute. It's almost like an OpenAI kind of a platform we have. So it's basically about getting your learning rate using in fuzzy control and actually kind of adapting your learning rate as you run your epics. So squashing function is also, we're trying to understand and improve squashing function in Capsule Networks. I'll just leave it to that. Deep switch is where we were sort of on the fly optimizer switching while you run epic. So all these flexibilities and building and stitching them together to eventually create our pattern file and eventually at some point of time, kind of pivot to a software solution is what we're looking at. And so it's kind of a master algorithm, not in the words of Pedro Domingos, but I mean, this is really something which we think can make impact. So capturing complexity, introducing nonlinearity, hopefully not just in 2 dimension, but someday, hopefully, when we understand more about human brain, then introduce it in 3 dimension and try to capture that. Okay, so I think that's it. There are a whole lot of things here, but I'll just stick to try to close this sort of conversation here. I would like to ask Rahi and Aishwarya to come over. So Aishwarya will answer your questions on implementation, installations, code base, and all that stuff around ARiA, and a bunch of other the products that we are creating. We call them products, basically algorithms that we are writing, like Deep Switch and all that. If you have any questions, I'll ask Aishwarya to answer, and ARiA questions you can answer. And about DeepKapha, our mission, what are we doing? So, as you can see, we're already ramping up and getting researchers on board. Any other questions on DeepRRP? While you have the questions, I will open up my webpage, so please continue and try to make most of this time.
No, I think the problem computational time and it will be anyway more computationally expensive because we have two hyperparameters that we have to take care of. But it's comparable. It's not it's not way beyond one would expect. So the kind of experiments that we ran, we couldn't run for more than 100 or 200 epochs. But that's the kind of thing that we all do when we are not Google, or we are, because the paper, the Swiss paper, they have actually run for 20,000 epochs. Different things they have run for 2 lakh epochs and things like that. So we cannot just do things like that. So obviously there is a little bit more, it will be a little bit more expensive than as compared to ReLU. But at the same time, what we are saying is because we have handled the dying neuron problem in a certain sense, your model will be more stable, and your model will be more efficient in a sense. So that basically is the whole idea. Yes. Yes.
So if you are using CIFAR 10, or if you are running on CIFAR 10 or CIFAR 100, and if you are using number of epochs more than 500 or thousands, then what ReLU faces is the neuron starts dying after like 750 or around 1,000 epochs. But ARiA keeps performing well after, yeah.
More questions? Sorry. Sorry. You can just share the same mic.
Yeah, a comparison of the conversion rates between the normal non-linear activation functions between ARiA and other functions.
Yeah, so we have plotted the curves, and
Just keep the mic there. We will use this mic.
yes. So we have plotted the error plots and the loss function plots, and so what we have observed is ReLU actually does little better in the starting epochs, so it goes to stability a little quickly, but then it stabilizes it at a lower value than ARiA would. So convergence rate, in a sense, it will take a little longer for ARiA to converge, but it does converge to a higher value. That's basically what. Yes.
The ARiA activation function, is it data specific or is it general? And like, why does it perform better than leaky ReLU?
No, it is totally general purpose. It is not data specific as such. As I said, the primary reason for it doing better than ReLU is because of we can control the shape of the curve. We can control the slope at which the function asymptotes, and that's the reason why as we understand, it is doing better than leaky ReLU or Swish or even ReLU.
So amazing. I mean, yeah. So we're kind of, we're having a defense strategy. We spread our
Is there an intuitive explanation to why that region of, why that non-monotonous region,
Yeah.
monotonic region, makes the activation function better for both Swish and ARiA? So, is there an intuitive explanation for that?
No, so as compared to ReLU, and I mean, you are saying that why it is better for both Swish and ARiA. Yeah, because see, in case of ReLU, you don't have any output in the negative region to begin with. So if your function, if your weight is, initialized at a negative value, then max of x, max of 0, x will be 0 always. So for those particular neurons for which the weight has been initialized at a negative value, you won't have any output. And then over the period, those particular neurons will just die down because there is nothing. And then your gradient will just slowly die down through them. And that's the reason why those particular neurons die. And they basically, contribute to lower model efficiency and stability. And when we have ARiA or Swish, you have this non-monotonic bump in the third quadrant, which basically helps your function to asymptote to a 0 value in a very smooth fashion. Instead of having a 0 value all of a sudden, you have smaller values which are still negative, but you still have some value at the end. And another thing that we think, can you hear? Yeah. So another thing that we think is essential here is the derivative plot. So the derivative plot of ReLU is a step function, but so it is not discontinuous at 0 value. And as compared to that, Swish and ARiA, both you have seen the derivative plots. So they are not really discontinuous. So that also affects in a, when you want to find the gradient descent or the gradient basically, that also is a major factor of contribution.
So Tarry, this goes back to your description of the thalamus and the connections that are made with new synapses and so forth. So now I want to understand how this corresponds with the capsule nets. Right? So I thought that what you're doing is the neuronal vectors that you kind of read out in the capsule nets is kind of analogous. Does it make sense, or is it something else?
Analogous?
Yeah, analogous. Is this analogous to the?
Yes, it is. Yes, absolutely, it is analogous, and we are finding that while trying to understand the bindings between, indeed, the firing and also. It's not just the circular learning. It's still in research. We are trying to understand about sort of how does this sort of randomization of random learning within this sort of localized region within your brain, and if we can derive mathematical functions out of these to essentially then aggregate these mathematical functions based, and probably even add to the learned mathematical functions that we're using already in CNN and RNN. And where I'm actually more hopeful that RNN's functions are going to help us more than CNN, to be very honest. And using these and actually proving the analogy with theory, the mathematical functions like you see with ARiA, and hopefully also applying these. It seems like in the beginning to us it seemed like a really big ocean to boil. But fortunately, what we have seen in the last 10 years is if you just kind of just do neuroscience and deep learning research, you will find that there are, and we are already working with theoretical physicists and mathematicians, even in Hebrew University, to really kind of make sense out of it. So yes, the analogy is soon going to be sort of not just correlatable, but also we hopefully having these beautiful conversations, understanding how to kind of prove this mathematically. So yes, it's pretty much analogous, yes. But there are still dotted lines, I would be very honest, and we are also being very open to things that we don't know or we're trying to understand.
So there's a follow-up on the network architectures. So it seems to me that CapsNet does better simply because the reverse graphics idea kind of solves, it actually models the way the world is with images
Yeah.
Of the world. So do you have any thoughts on, does that give us ideas about what you could do with other domains, in terms of designing networks, right? So a lot of people are now trying to use deep neural networks for tabular data, right? Now, not too much success there, obviously. So I speak of it from the point of view of Oracle, right? Because a lot of the data that we see at our customers is that. And if for nothing else, just for the novelty factor, people like to do this.
Yeah.
Okay.
just to add to I'm an Oracle sort of veteran myself. I haven't worked with Oracle, but I worked with since the 2000 from Oracle version 7.3 until back then. Is it okay if I think I've understood your question, and I'll try to answer that. So back then, I mean, our Oracle, so it's also very mathematical actually. Not many people know that, and it was very fascinating back in the days when. Ask Tom, if you know asktom.com, he was one of the, Tom was one of the best sort of person to teach people on databases. But, cost-based algorithm, rule-based algorithm, they were really cool back then. So people I've found with some old colleagues that people are also using deep neural networks in PLSQL and all that stuff. So that's super fascinating. It is not popular, but it makes a lot of sense to apply these in tabular data, especially if we take unstructured data and create tabular structures. My problem is, well, I think tabular data has its limitations. That is the problem which we are trying to solve by adding more compute power. But eventually we will run against those sort of computing problems if we add, let's say, I don't know, trillion sort of lines. I know Oracle is one of the fastest databases in the world still. But I think how do we sort of fix this unstructured data? Because I know back in the days, I still remember 2000, I used to, getting sort of B-lob or C-lobs, binary large objects or character large objects. Just provide a pointer to this huge sort of archive where you have. So I was doing crazy things, but it costs. So you either sort of I had to do rule-based algorithm to try to write my own script in Java, and then actually sort of have them pulled into PLSQL. But I think there might be a lot of work done, but I don't know if, I hope that the deep learning community also embraces the tabular. There's a lot of tabular data that could really benefit from the neural networks architecture. But I'm still worried about how do we solve this problem of...
I'm not just focusing on the tabular part. I mean, tabular is just an example. But so for example, for speech, right? Obviously a CNN is not useful for speech, right? So similarly, when you have other kinds of data, if one sits down and says, oh, this is the structure of the data in the real world, then I can design an architecture suitable to my data. Because if you think of it as a universal approximator, all you're trying to find is a function that approximates the real world scenario. So I was just thinking, would that be a good strategy to design new architectures?
I haven't tried it yet. I think, well, as long as, and we're all trying to fit the curve all this time. I mean, that's the whole thing where a lot of, it's working well, but there's also, and I also listen to the people who have who are strongly opposed to it, and they make a lot of sense as well. So I think as long as we can find, the common middle ground between, well, can we fit the curve? And I definitely think, actually it's a great question, because I'm really concerned. That's what the conversation we had with IBM. It's still kind of the Wild West, if you ask me. I mean, Google and Facebook, they're all doing their good stuff, but for their own purpose. If there is not a sort of a more consolidated architecture for the tabular data, where I would definitely love to explore if can we use CapsNet also to experiment with tabular data. Maybe we should try to hook up and try to see if we can, if you guys can provide us with some, let's say anonymized huge tabular data, and then we give it a spin with CapsNet. So I think it's possible, because it's a great question again, because we have already created a caps layer that is supposed to, and you can find it on GitHub. So Huadong has, we haven't been maintaining for the last couple of months because we were still developing stuff. So caps layer is where we are trying to create this network layer architecture. And maybe we should loop in our friends in Oracle as well and see if, what can we learn from each other there. Makes sense, totally.
Thanks, Dr. Tarry. I think that's all the time we have for today.
We have kind of run over time. I think it's amazing that you guys came. Thank you so much for listening. I hope it made sense. And if you have any questions, I think my colleagues are also flying back. I'm flying back myself at 9 o'clock. So I'm very happy. I will be walking around to talk to you. I thank you again. I appreciate your, all that cognitive overload. And still you stayed and listened. And it's been an amazing crowd. Thank you so much.